Hi, everyone. This is John Daly. I'm here with another episode of the Daily Express. My guest today he's a pretty big deal, ladies and gentlemen. He's a retired professor of national security affairs at the U.S. Naval War College. He's a staff writer at The Atlantic. He's also a very nice guy, even though people on Twitter are super mean to him. I'm talking about Tom Nichols. How's it going today, Tom?
Hey, John, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Oh, good to see you too, and thanks for joining me. You've always, we talked a little bit about this before going on just now, but you've always been very generous with your time when it comes to me. You wrote a blurb for one of my books, which I very much appreciated. I wanted to have you on to talk about some recent happenings in the wacky world of American politics. On Sunday, there was a second assassination attempt on Donald Trump. The former president was playing golf at his club when a Secret Service agent spotted a man with a rifle outside a fence, aiming through some shrubs. He was reportedly 300 to 500 yards away from Trump. The agent opened fire. The man fled, but he was thankfully apprehended. There are lots of components to this story, but the first one I wanted to ask you about, Tom, is with this being the second instance of an armed man getting this physically close to a former president. What do you think this is doing to the reputation of the Secret Service?
I don't. I think the first time that in Pennsylvania, where you had this venue that had exposed rooftops. I mean, the Secret Service clearly made some mistakes, and they've said so, right? The service come forward and said, "Oops, yeah, oops, probably should have had somebody on that roof." I think this second one is different. We live in an open society, and Trump goes off on big golf courses. Now, you would think that a former president would have a perimeter control around that golf course. So maybe they did make a mistake, or maybe he's underprotected. It's kind of hard to protect a golf course in that sense, but. I think we should wait on this one to say that the Secret Service messed up, because a guy hiding in the bushes in Florida near a golf course with a gun. I mean, I think that there are limits in the number of scenarios the Secret Service can, and actually you could argue, I guess, that the system worked, right? They sent an advance man out there, poke around, saw the guy, flushed him out. That's why they send a guy 2 holes down the course ahead of the former president. So I'm glad no matter what I think about Trump, I'm glad he wasn't harmed. Glad they got the guy. I'm glad, that nobody was hurt. But I'm not willing to trash the Secret Service on this one just yet.
Fair enough.
That's what oversight and hearings are for. Really.
Exactly.
And remember, I just wrote about this yesterday. Remember that 2 people with guns got within feet of Gerald Ford, not yards, not a golf course, not 2 holes on a golf course, feet away from Gerald Ford twice in 17 days.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So,
Yeah, it's amazing, and too, that's sort of like almost like a footnote too. A lot of people kind of forget about that actually happened. So no, it's good. It's good to point that out.
It's because Gerald Ford didn't try and fundraise off it.
That's a good point. That's a good point. He was pretty kind of low key about it, wasn't he?
Even Reagan after Reagan was almost killed, and
Right.
as I wrote after the Butler incident, Reagan comes out. He spends about 2 or 3 paragraphs. He goes out, gives an address to Congress, and mostly just thanks his doctors, talks about a nice note he gets from a little kid, and says, okay, now let's talk about cutting taxes and squashing inflation. And that's it. And I think, we used to have presidents that were somewhat more responsible about these things, because every president has had, somebody pointed out today that some guy got 25 years for trying to kill Barack Obama. Again, you forget because it didn't go out as a fundraising letter.
Right. And this is clearly, these last 2 incidents have fueled the conspiracy theory crowd. We've been seeing lots of notable folks on the right, including Republican members of Congress, use the phrase, they did this, they are trying to stop Trump. The insinuation being
They
that,
tried to kill him.
exactly, exactly, and the insinuation, of course, that the Democratic establishment or the Biden administration or whoever is behind all this, that they're putting out the hit. Others have argued that it's heated anti-Trump rhetoric out there that inspired these two. What do you say to that, Tom?
Well, I think, conspiracy theorists always live in a world where nothing is accidental. It's just not possible that, I mean, go back to the Kennedy assassination, right? It's just not possible that a Marine, a trained shooter, gets up in a building and takes out a president. It can't be that simple. There has to be something else going on. 19 guys with box cutters can't possibly have taken down the World Trade Center by flying an airplane into it. Nobody could. I mean, for years after that, when I was teaching at the War College, I would say, look, this was a low-tech attack. I once said, I think I horrified a class of my undergraduates one night when I said, all of the people, you and I and all the people in this room, we could have pulled off 9/11. If we just had the money and a couple of you had some basic flight training, we could have pulled off 9/11. But people can't accept that. They can't process that because the impact is so immense that it's terrifying to think that the world doesn't make sense. So they have to make it make sense. It can't just be that this guy, Routh, right, who's got a criminal record and clearly is, not the most stable guy. Unlike Crooks, the Pennsylvania shooter, this guy does have a big social media footprint, and it's a little wacky. Crooks, on the other hand, was a classic, what I call a classic lost boy, loner, misfit, no visible presence in his community, work home. But that's, in a way, those explanations are too terrifying because then they could happen to anybody randomly. Conspiracy theories are comforting. It's like it had to be really complicated because then it can't really happen very often, right? And that the world isn't random. I was almost killed about 15 years ago in a car crash where a drug dealer, well, this guy was a walking rap sheet, drug dealer, rapist, child abductor, heroin dealer, you name it, right? I mean, he was just he's still in prison, will be forever. As I was coming out of a side street at 11 o'clock at night, this guy was in a high-speed chase and wiped me out. Just like took me down right there, almost killed me. And, you don't want to think that, like, the first thing I thought actually was that my car exploded. My mind went to the most complicated explanation. Well, I work at the War College. Maybe this is, still really close to 9/11. Did somebody plant a bomb in my car? No, it was worse than that. It was just the hand of fate, right? Remember laughing, the fickle finger of fate, pointed at me at that moment and said, you are in the wrong place at the wrong time. And people don't like to accept that. They don't like to think that. And so they add all this complexity to it, and it makes life interesting. And then they can get involved with it. I'm important. I'm doing important things. I'm Columbo. I'm unraveling the mystery. I'm solving the crime, instead of saying, yeah, it sucks that there are people with AK-47s. I'm kind of curious where that came from. And it's not your typical. You don't see a lot of those floating around in the wild. At least not outside of Afghanistan or the less developed world, but the idea that all of this can just happen is just too much for people to accept. So they get involved with it. They feel they've imposed order on the world. They become part of a huge drama that becomes very satisfying to them. I'm fighting them. I'm part of the brave anti-conspiracy fighter, and it would be silly, except that it's a deadly serious business.
Right, and it's dangerous, as we've seen, in some cases. What do you think of, there's a lot of talk out there now about the, vitriolic rhetoric from the other side. It sounds a little, it's hypocritical. I mean, it's you see some of the things Trump has said over the last 9 years, and then for his supporters to kind of just act like this is something exclusively happening on the other side is ridiculous. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, there, the with both of these, in the first case, Republicans were desperate to find that this kid was like, a left winger,
Yeah,
and it doesn't usually work that way. I mean, this Crooks guy researched Biden and the DNC and where they were going to be. I mean, this was just somebody who was going to kill somebody famous. Um, and In the second case, I mean, yeah, the guy donated to Democratic causes, but says online that he voted for Trump in 2016. Like most of these people, they are not part of coherent plots. They just are kind of loose marbles that go whichever way the table tilts. Now, can intemperate rhetoric affect those people? Sure, it can, but then that's instead of a heckler's veto, we have an assassin's veto. We can't say anything bad in politics because then someone will take a shot at the president. And Trump, of all people, for Trump's people to make that argument after Trump has referred to people as human scum and vermin and enemies of the people. I mean, the day this Florida guy got caught, Trump tries to pin it on Biden and Harris and says they are the enemy within. Now, I'm sorry, but if you're trying to bring down the temperature, you don't point to the sitting vice president and president and say, they tried to kill me. They're an enemy within our government. It's very hypocritical. It very much goes one way. And the part of it that really, again, had me just kind of nauseated by it was not only does he try and pin this on them, meaning Harris and Biden and everybody in the government and the deep state, which is such a stupid phrase that people misuse, but then sends out I mean, the fundraising is the part I can't get past. That's the part where,
yeah, he did did it both times. Both times he was very quick on that.
There's just an awfulness to it that I can't get past. Even with Donald Trump, you would think, just one moment of grace. Say, hey, this guy, especially in Pennsylvania, this guy came within, a centimeter of killing you. Maybe have a moment of reflect, but he's not capable of any of that. He thinks purely in terms of what serves me at any given time. And instead of thinking about the country and saying, which he did finally. So I had a nice call from Joe Biden. We talked. My first thought was, talked about what? That he tried to kill you? What are you saying? I mean, that's the other thing is that, I mean, they know. The Republicans know. Trump and the Republicans know. They know that these accusations are bullshit. And there's really a hollow cynicism to it that I think is really disturbing and really, again, kind of nauseating. I mean, it's almost like you almost wish that they believed it. If that makes any sense. Like it would be less appalling if you could say, "Wow, they're wrong," but they genuinely believe this. But Vance and Trump and the rest of these guys, they don't believe a word of this. Vance is the worst of all of them. He knows exactly what he's doing.
No, I think that's true. And
doing it to his own people.
Oh yeah. No. Let's go back a couple weeks to the presidential debate on ABC. I think most people see that Harris objectively won that. I think it was a very bad night for Donald Trump. That's one of the reasons why we're talking about conspiracy theories. We're now hearing about how she got the answers ahead of time, that she had in her earrings.
Yeah, she had something in her ear, but apparently he had something in his ear that said, "Talk about eating cats. Talk about eating cats. Do it. I mean, come on."
No, it's but what I don't know is how much of an impact that debate, will have on the electorate. Is what happened that night. Again, a very bad night for Trump. Is it going to matter when it comes to November, or in this era of short attention spans. People may have already forgotten about everything that happened there because of this latest assassination attempt. Do you think it's going to make a difference? I mean, we see a little bit in the polling, but it's very tight, the race.
I don't, here's the magic three words we're never supposed to say. I don't know. I think it can, because I think the thing to understand for the people that are watching this who are Democrats, right? Republicans, they're set. They're going to vote the way they're going to vote. They're a cult. It's a cult of personality. Trump could have gone up there and lit his hair on fire and started speaking in tongues, and it wouldn't have mattered. It might have, that kind of behavior might have solidified his base. So just accept that in a mathematical equation, they're the constant, right? They're the known quantity that's always going to be there. Where it does, I think, have an effect with a debate like that, it does two things. It creates two different permission structures. It creates a permission structure for people who say, I've done everything I can to be with this guy, the kind of wavering or reluctant Trump voters. I voted for him in 2016 and I felt good about it because of Hillary Clinton. I voted for him in 2020. I didn't feel great about it, but I hung in there. I just can't do it again. I mean, the guy is just gonzo. He's just he's off the ledge. And they won't vote for Harris, but they might not vote. They may split their ticket. They might stay home. Who knows? But it could cost them. The other permission structure is that I think she did well enough that there were wavering people could say, yeah, okay, I could vote for her. I can see that now. And I know among some of my former conservative friends, the reaction, that I got from them the next day was that at least I talked to maybe 5 or 6 of my former Republican pals who all said, I feel better now. Not in general, but like they watch her and say, okay, I feel better. Because you have to remember in 2019, in the debates in 2019, she wasn't good.
Right.
And frankly, in 2020. And to this day, she's not a good extemporaneous speaker. I'm going to get, the K-Hive is going to go nuts on me for saying that, but she's just not. There are people who are not good at extemporaneous speaking. She's one of them. Ironically enough, right? Reagan, the Republican icon, Reagan had those bad moments where he'd get caught off guard. Somebody throw him a question, he'd and he'd sort of, fumble his way through it. I have to divert and tell a Reagan story about spontaneous stuff, because when I used to teach this stuff at the War College, we always taught about how, hey, whatever the president says is policy. And when he was talking about Beirut and what was about to be that terrible moment in Beirut in 1983, he's walking away from the podium and says, well, okay. And this is what I mean about extemporaneous speaking, that you have to remember there are a lot of presidents who are bad at this. And as he's walking away, reporter says, Mr. President, if they're shot at, are we going to bring them home? And he stops and he says, yes. Like you could see him and he goes, and you could just imagine all his aides going, pretend you didn't hear it. Pretend you didn't hear it. No more questions. And he stops and he kind of even physically just goes, yes. And after that, well, now you're stuck. It's policy, right? So, to go back to Harris, a lot of us watched Harris 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and said, she should be better than this. She's a senator, prosecutor. And I think that the debate mattered in that sense, where a lot of people saw her and said, okay, yes, she can think on her feet. She's changed. She's gotten a lot better. And she moderated some of her positions. I was really glad that she didn't get into wonky policy debates the way Biden tried to do in that debate. That's not the place to do it. And in my opinion, that's not what this election's about. Right. But again, so I think long answer to a short question, that, yeah, I think it created dual permission structures for people that wanted to get off the Trump train. at this last stop, they finally, some of them could say, okay, I just can't take this anymore. And for people who wanted to feel better about Harris, I think they were able to watch that and say, okay, I'm comfortable now.
Yeah, anecdotally, I've noticed that too. Talking to people, people that weren't going to vote for Trump, but were kind of. I think there's a little bit of reassurance there that after watching that maybe they could vote for Harris or but we'll see what happens.
Well, and the other thing I was going to add, I think the important thing to add to all this is the number of people we're talking about that's going to sway these swing states is tiny. So, this is what I meant about kind of addressing this to Democrats. And I said, but I wanted to see her talk about that, and I wanted to hear that, and I think she should have stomped on his guts, and she should have. This wasn't for you.
Right.
This is for, this was clearly a performance that was aimed at a couple 100,000 people, which I was kind of hoping she would do. But this was a performance that was aimed at a couple 100,000 people in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Nevada, Georgia, the rest. This was not a debate performance to see if you could run up the score in California or Massachusetts,
No, I think that's true. I think she understood the audience that she wanted to focus on. She needed to focus on. There's a lot of criticism, obviously, of Trump too, because he went very cable newsy about a lot of things. Talked about things people had no idea what he was talking about. But let's switch over to the Springfield, Ohio story, Tom. You're a big cat guy, so this may be personal for you.
Here,
not in the room at the moment. We're gonna.
This is our new. This is Lily.
That's huge.
And, yeah, she's mad at me for waking her up, but yes, stop it. I know you want to chew on my thumb now. Okay, you can go back to sleep. Thanks for being poorly behaved in your first national appearance.
that was a great cameo. I'm glad we did that. So just to sort of summarize the story, I know most people kind of understand where it's at, but there were unsubstantiated reports of Haitian migrants stealing and eating people's cats in Springfield. Those reports were mostly social media posts. They were amplified by a number of people on the right, including Ohio's own J.D. Vance, and ultimately Donald Trump, as we saw from that rant on during the presidential debate. Over the weekend, Vance, and I think I'm interpreting this fairly, he basically admitted that the reports were not credible, but that he amplified them anyway to draw more media attention to the broader issue of immigration policy, sort of an ends justify the means type of argument. Tom, what do you make of this?
Well, first of all, I think some of this was to get the attention off of Trump. Trump has this disastrous debate. He completely, kind of loses his mind in front of the American public for 90 minutes. And the response is, look, they're eating cats in Ohio. Make sure Fluffy is in the house, So I think some of it was just a kind of attempt at deflection. But also, and to dominate the news cycle, which it did. And then for Vance to go out there, Vance has tried to be very clever and have this both ways. Well, I think it's true, but if I have to create stories, I think what he meant, I'm going to try and be charitable to J.D. Vance, which is really hard to do. If I have to create narratives, I think, if I have to bolster that narrative in order to get people to pay attention, I'll do that. It's still lying. And there is no evidence of this. You had some of the usual provocateurs on social media saying, "Well, we found here's a guy in a different part of Ohio a year ago grilling a duck, and it sure looks like a cat." It's just so stupid. These are people doing this to advocate. What? That this unhinged old man and his, faithful ward, the boy wonder, should become the most powerful people in America. What kind of insanity is that? And I think it's just a reminder of, how unserious the Republicans have become about this. I mean, the whole election is about trolling. There's a good piece the other day, and I want to say, I wish I want to, I think it was at the Dispatch. And I'm not being coy, I just can't remember which one of my friends on the right wrote it, but about how Vance has just decided to be a troll. Like, he's just running as a troll now. And I think Trump glommed onto this and has attached himself to people like Laura Loomer because he's scared. He needs to win this election in order to stay out of jail. And, who's going to tell him the really crazy, who's going to feed him that, grade A conspiracy smack that makes everything feel better? Well, to their credit, apparently there are people on his staff that aren't willing to do it. So he found somebody, and that leads us to, get Fido off the street before a Haitian eats him. I mean,
everybody likes dogs and cats, so you gotta make sure they're under fire, right? So
it's nuts. But it's also, I mean, if you think about it, it's like the trifecta, right? It's hatred of immigrants, it's hatred of black people, it's fear of an alien culture that obviously eats cats and dogs. It's just such a perfect story. But the part I think that shouldn't go unremarked, and I'm proud to say that in the Atlantic there have been stories about this, about how much misery Vance is willing to inflict on his own constituents, and not just on his own constituents, but on the kind of people he claims to defend.
No, that's a really good point. You touched on this other area just a second ago, but I was listening to Chris Steyerwalt the other day on his podcast, and he was describing, and there's been many examples of this, but he was describing how the right-wing media is under this sort of constant pressure to substantiate even Trump's most embarrassing claims. And I wanted just to read a quote that Steyerwalt said. "I would not be surprised if these pro-Trump outlets devote the next several months or even a year to nailing down the case that there was such a person who ate a dog somewhere in Ohio." As you pointed out, it only took a couple of days. There was, I think it was Chris Rufo had an exclusive report about, here's this instance of an African migrant in Dayton, Ohio, who last year allegedly barbecued stray cats, although the video makes it look like it could be a bird. It looks like there's talons sticking up out of the grill. But the fact that people go out on these limbs, I remember years ago, I think it was for John Nolte on Breitbart, wrote this sort of infamous piece where he was substantiating Trump's claim about seeing American Muslims dancing in celebration to 9/11. Yeah. It ended up being some little snippet of some news report that really was a much tinier.
Because Trump said it, and they had to verify it.
Yeah, it's just that is, I was a longtime Republican, still a conservative. I think we relate on this. Just very frustrating because it doesn't even. People should just be able to denounce this pretty easily. Stuff like this is just being ridiculous, is silly, but no, they gotta, part of the media entertainment culture that we're in, they gotta rush to his aid and really make fools out of themselves to bolster stuff even this ridiculous. And I keep hoping at some point the right's going to move on from this, and it just doesn't.
Well, it's not the right anymore, let's face it. This is not conservatism in any way that you or I, this is all a cult of personality and the leader principle, right? Of he can never be wrong. And if he says something, then somewhere out there is a relevant fact that will make him right, no matter how, if he says, I am certain there is life on Mars, they will point a telescope at Mars, joggle it for a minute and say, look, it moved. It's clearly, that because they can't be wrong. And I think one thing that people don't appreciate enough about MAGA World is because MAGA World comes across so confident, right? So, but every time this comes up, I always use a line from John le Carre's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, where Smiley is talking about meeting his opposite number, this fanatical Soviet spy boss named Karla. And he says, once I'd met him, I knew he could be beaten because I knew he was a fanatic. And a fanatic, and this is such a great line, and it's so true, a fanatic is always harboring a secret doubt. And that's why they do this. They need to prove this stuff because deep down, they know how crazy he is. They know how bonkers these statements are, and so they have to get out there and say, no, it's true. We can prove it, right? That whole business with Rufo and the guy with the grill, it's like, I am a serious intellectual. I work at a think tank. I could not possibly be part of some crazy hoodwinking scheme about migrants eating cats. So I can prove it that restores me, and it covers my, doubts, and I don't look so stupid and abominably, idiotic. But it is all born out of insecurity and embarrassment. Somebody said to me the other day, well, they don't feel embarrassment. Yes, they do. My experience with most of my Trump supporting friends for almost 10 years now has been there is a low level of embarrassment and humiliation that they feel about Trump that makes them very angry. That's where the anger comes from. And that's where these crazy, we must prove it to be true things come from. You're right, though, John. It would so much be easier, right, to just say, hey, I'm a Republican and I like low taxes and I don't like, leftish causes. And Donald Trump's my guy. I know he's kind of out there, but he's my guy. And the dogs and cats things, that's just stupid shit he says. But instead, they can't. At this point, they did that in 2016, and it kind of worked for them. They can't do it anymore.
Yeah, no, we've seen a lot of people hurt professionally for denouncing, the things that Trump says, and it's sad to watch. Well, I don't want to keep too much longer, Tom. I do have one more question. Last weekend on Truth Social, Donald Trump boldly declared his hatred for Taylor Swift. Was this a smart political move or a brilliant political move?
Why's he got to be so mean? My daughter's going to love that I remembered a Taylor Swift lyric.
Mine too.
Again, he can't help himself. This is narcissistic injury, right? This is like one of the biggest pop stars in the world endorsed my opponent. Well, I hate her. I mean, an adept politician, could judo this, saying, "Oh, I'm so sad to hear this. I've always loved Taylor's music, and I hope, when I'm in the White House, she'll come and play, or something like that." That's the way normal people. Instead, he says, "I hate Taylor Swift." Okay, I think the Democrats keep sitting back and saying, "Can't believe we might be losing to this guy," but he's making their ads for them. I think he's just it's like he's the thing that has always struck me about Trump is that he's a little boy. He has this reputation, right? I mean, his followers love him. He's a man. He's tough. He's a manly man. But he's like, in reality, he's like 7. And I hate Taylor Swift. You're not my mommy. I hate you, Dad. I mean, it's such a little boy reaction. So I don't hate Taylor Swift. I have a daughter who grew up in the Taylor Swift era. I know her music well. I think crossing that particular community of nice kids is probably a really stupid thing to do. But if Donald Trump could resist doing that, he wouldn't be Donald Trump.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of new voters, young voters are very much Swift fans. It's just another unforced error. Well, Tom, I don't want to keep you any longer. You've been very generous with your time. I always enjoy your insight, listening to what you have to say, reading your work. Can you tell people how to find your work?
Sure. I am at Radio Free Tom on Twitter and Blue Sky. The easiest way is to sign up for the Atlantic Daily, which is free. So there you go. You get to read the Daily for free if you're have it delivered to your mailbox from the Atlantic. And of course, you can always find me in the Atlantic magazine, which is where I work. So that's the easiest way to find me.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thanks a lot, Tom, and you have yourself a great day. All right.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.